Good Thursday morning, everyone, and welcome to the Pittsburgh Current Podcast, live from the vibrant and beautiful Beechview Business District here in Beechview neighborhood of Pittsburgh. We got a great show today. We're going to be talking NFL football with none other than KDKA sportscaster, reporter, preseason play-by-play man, Bob Pompeani. Before we get into it, though, we want to talk to you a little about some of the things we have coming up. Current issue of the Pittsburgh Current is on stands right now, and it features a story on Three Pigs Collective, which is a great fashion, sort of the intersection of fashion and art is what they're doing over there. So you definitely need to check that out. Our fall guide will be out September 17th, and if you have an event that you want to submit, please submit it to charlie@pittsburghcurrent.com. And if you're interested in advertising in the issue, reach out to Paul@pittsburghcurrent.com or Andrea@pittsburghcurrent.com, and they will get you taken care of. And along with that, I can tell you that if you advertising in the fall guide, you'll be advertising in the third most read publication in the city of Pittsburgh, behind just the Post-Gazette and Pittsburgh Magazine, according to the latest data compiled by the media audit company. So we're very excited about that. And we want to thank all of you for reading and for helping us get through this first year. It's been an exciting one for sure. Then also we have a pop-up for Brood on Grant. Rob Rogers, thank you for the Kickstarter, folks, to bring back Brood on Grant. And Mike, I have forgot to write down the date on that. I believe we'll write it in the comments section. I apologize for that. Bethany was just here and she left me a bunch of instructions. That's one I forgot. And then on December 5th, we'll be having a Repeal Day celebration. So stay tuned for more on that. But we're done talking about that. What we want to do is talk about football. And to do that, we have Bob Pompeani with us. Bob, thanks for taking the time this morning. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Charlie, how are you? Anytime, no problem.
Yeah, so I would think for you, I mean, obviously the whole year, I mean, there's sports going on all the time, but for you in terms of the Steelers, is it more hectic for you during the preseason because you are doing the play-by-play for the preseason games?
Yes, very much so. It's busy all year. Let's just say that, because and what we try to do, based in the city, is we cover all of the pro teams, of course, and then there's enough college activity and then high school on top of that, and there are only so much of us to go around. Right. So it does make it kind of crazy in terms of scheduling. But for the most part, yeah, during football season, and when we started in these games, mostly because, as I always like to tell people, the preseason is like doing 4 games in one, because you have double the size of each roster. Right. And you have all these guys who comprise the future bartenders of America. And a lot of them are coming in games when you least expect it, and wearing double and sometimes triple numbers. I've seen that a few times. So you got to make sure you're on who you're on, and it's not as easy as it appears that way. So, but I enjoy that. I always have. I love that part of I know some people want to get away from preseason games, but for me, and I know I speak for coaches who love it, because they get opportunities to see guys that probably they won't ever get a chance to see, and some of them turn into roster members, as the Steelers have found out with a couple of guys this year, and Ulysses Gilbert III and Tuzar Skipper, and for that matter, Cam Kelly, who was a Alliance of American Football refugee when they went bankrupt. So, I mean, sometimes the only way you're going to find out is to give these guys a chance, and those 4 preseason games provide that.
How deep does the prep go for something like that, Bob? Because again, you have to be ready for the free agent walk-on who is kind of coming out of nowhere, and then the last 6 minutes of the game, you've got this guy who maybe certainly we've never heard of. Is that a guy that you've done some level of research on, so you can tell us something about some anecdotal thing about his college girlfriend or his sister?
Charlie, yeah, I try to dig as much, and a lot of that stuff is not available. Normally the star players, you can go online and find accounts of stuff they do in Wikipedia and their professional page and Instagram and all these things. But for me, I got to make phone calls a lot of the time just to make sure. And I never want to leave myself naked in that regard. I don't want to have someone come in. I have no idea who they are. At least if I have some idea, right, I can make it happen. And you never know. Some of these guys turn into players who all of a sudden take over a game in the fourth quarter, and you wonder, who is this?
Right.
And if I don't know, then how are the people watching supposed to know? So I do spend a lot of time. You can ask my wife. I sit out here on my patio, sometimes into the wee hours of the morning when I get home, just trying to familiarize myself with a lot of people.
And I would think for some of these guys, the guys who again will leave here and will go and sell cars or use the major that they their degree that they got in college. That's going to be kind of their one big moment to have, like, that's the tape that they'll have. They'll have that one moment where they were in a preseason game and the guy announcing said a couple of complimentary things. That's for some of those guys. That's going to be that preseason game is their big moment, I think.
No, there's no question about that. A lot of those guys too, afterwards will sometimes call me specifically and ask for a tape or for a clip that we might be able to provide them, just to add to a resume on a job that they hope leads them to another opportunity. And it's very difficult. If you look at the life of coaches specifically, and they have to make 20 stops before they get to maybe the job of their dreams. Well, with some of these players, it's well documented. They have 8, 9, 10 starts, along the way. They're with all these different teams, sometimes the CFL, sometimes the UFL, sometimes the USL, all these L's. Yeah. These leagues are everywhere, and they're just trying to gain experience as much as they can. And sometimes finally it clicks. So yeah, it's a very challenging experience. I'll tell you that for sure.
Was there one of those guys that took off that you sort of called early on? I mean, James Harrison obviously is a player that comes to mind who was one of those players who just showed up one season and then was just dominant for the next several years of his career. Was James one of those guys, or were there any of those guys that you saw and who wasn't supposed to be anything, but then they turn out to be the man?
Yeah, it's funny, Charlie, because James Harrison is one of many undrafted players who've gone on to great things. Him more so than most. I mean, he's gone on to Super Bowl moments that will live forever. The 100-yard interception of Kurt Warner, defensive player of the year from an undrafted player. Well, more recently, I can give you a lot of them. More recently, I'll tell you about Olusegun Adeni, who we call Ola. Mm-hmm. And I remember talking to Charlie Batchman, and I said, "Okay, Charlie, here's your test for today. Pronounce this name." And he looked, he said, "Nope, I won't." I said, "Well, we're going to call him something." He goes, "Well, the guys here call him Ola." I said, "It's fine with me. Ola is good." He ended up, making the team last year. And they have a few others this year who are in the same boat. So, that's the fun part of doing this. And when a guy like Tuzar Skipper, when you look at all the things that have happened to him, mm-hmm. And he's another MAC guy, he made the Steelers roster and he forced their hand basically, which led to changes in how many wide receivers they kept. It probably led to the release of Eli Rogers. But, he's gone through ACLs, doubts, different places, transfers, just to get a chance. And now he finally took advantage of one.
Do you what about the receiving core for the Steelers this year is, and mainly the question is because Antonio Brown obviously isn't there, but as we've seen some of these off-field shenanigans continue in Oakland, I don't know that that we should be too upset that Antonio's not here. But do you have faith in the Steelers receiving core that because I don't know that there's I don't think that Juju has where Antonio had Juju. I don't think that Juju necessarily has it. I think James Washington potentially could become that guy. Hopefully, Moncrief can become that guy. But what do you see in terms of production? Because the Steelers are going to throw the ball. What do you see in terms of that unit this year?
I see good things. I think I see diversity. I think Roethlisberger really likes the fact that no longer is there someone who, and I think Mike Collins said it right the other day, when I asked about Juju Smith-Schuster, he said, the diva's gone. Someone asked him, he goes, "Let me tell you something. Every wide receiver I know who's really good wants the football. They're all going to cry for the football." But that's the thing. I think it's good to have guys who want it. They have guys who I think are going to be very good at it. I do think Juju is capable of moving up to that number one. I'm never going to predict the kind of numbers that Antonio Brown put up here because those are off the charts good. But I think he can be really good. And I think he'll make it easier for James Washington. I see leaps and bounds in his performance from last year to this year. I think Moncrief is a veteran, and I think he has a comfort zone with Ben Roethlisberger already. And I think Deontay Johnson, when he figures it all out, and sometimes it takes a while, I think this guy could be very special. He's one of the smoothest route runners that I think. I base a lot of this on what Charlie Batch, Merrill Hodge, and Chris Hoke tell me, because I hang out a lot with them in analyzing games and tapes, especially for St. Vincent. And they say the route running is smooth, and it's really smooth. And so I think they're in pretty good shape there.
We were talking to Bob Pompeani, KDKA sportscaster, Steelers preseason play-by-play announcer. We're talking about the Steelers, of course, and we're also talking about the start of the NFL season tonight. Bears versus Packers. Bob, obviously, I would think with what you do, you're also a football fan. But do you get a chance? This is kickoff night. Do you get a chance to actually watch a game, or is this maybe your only chance to watch a game?
Oh, I watch a lot of games, Charlie. I if I don't watch them live, I'll watch them on DVR. I mean, I want to know a lot, and I'm an all sports kind of guy.
Yeah.
Whether that's football, which is something I do a lot of, or hockey. Love the pace of those games. Baseball, basketball. I'm a big NBA fan. No one in Pittsburgh likes that. They hate me for it. That's okay. Yeah, I do. I watch. I want to know. I want to know about everybody. Fantasy football will take you into that direction if you've ever played it.
Yeah.
And I used to, but I don't play it anymore. It's just too time-consuming with everything else going on. So you must learn about players, and I like it. I think it's fun.
Yeah, and I think honestly, for a lot of probably younger folks growing up, I was probably in my 20s when fantasy football was really taking off, and you learned so much about it, to the point my wife is annoyed by we're sitting there and somebody will come on the field and I'll say, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. She's like, why would you know that? It's because I'm a compulsive gambler. That's how I would know that. So gambling degenerate. But it really is. Fantasy sports have baseball too. I play baseball, and talking about time consuming, fantasy baseball is the most time-consuming thing I think that you could do with your time. But I know a lot about National League benches and farm teams. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think you have to, but it's fun. I mean, that's what makes it all interesting to do. There are stories within stories. There are not just team stories. There are individual stories. Some of them good, some of them bad. You have to find them, and I tell you, in today's day and age with all social media, you have to watch. I feel like I don't really like the fact that I got to sit there and follow a lot of players. Some of them I don't want to follow, but if you don't, you'll miss things that they post, especially a guy like Antonio Brown. He makes news every day from his Instagram account. If you're not aware of what he's doing, then you're missing out on potential some news. Yeah,
since his name was we're talking about him. Bob, when do you think things started to go? Because the Antonio Brown who started with his team is not the Antonio Brown that we saw up until last year, the last few years. I remember when Mike Wallace left, there was the question of would it be Wallace or would it be Brown? And Brown he seemed like such an unselfish player, just a team guy, a really kind of mild mannered, sort of low. Not under the radar, certainly by his play. But when did it start to change for him that you saw?
Well, I mean, this is a debate that I think people are going to have for a long time. I never saw anything but, a guy who was having fun, who worked every day of his life. Yeah. Who had a smile on his face, although I knew it was a fake smile. I've seen instances, and I never wanted to say anything about it publicly at the time because it's none of my business how he. But there were some times where I thought it was very fake. But still, I mean, I judge people on what they do on the field. That's the only thing I can do. Their personal lives are that until they become newsworthy for whatever reason. So I don't know. I mean, some people cite the hit by Perfect in the Cincinnati game, that helmet that he took squarely, and the concussion issue is real in the NFL. I don't know if that had anything to do with it, and I can't speculate. But I also think there was a jealousy and a narcissistic part of Antonio Brown, and he does not like when other people surpass him in whatever the case may be. Media following, social media hits, Instagram likes, salary. He seems to want to be on top of everything. And if he isn't, he gets mad, and he gets jealous, and he gets envious, and he gets nasty. And I think that's what we've seen. I can't put my finger on why. I've talked to a lot of people I think know him a lot better than me, and even they, give me a mixed bag of opportunities and comments.
Do you think his departure was the right thing for the Steelers to do?
I think they had no choice. I don't think they really wanted to. They put up with a lot of stuff. You remember, Charlie?
Yep.
The Facebook Live thing, which was just, you can't do that.
Right.
That violates the cardinal sin of a locker room. But now look at yesterday. He takes a letter that is a private letter from his new GM, Mike Mayock. He takes a photocopy of it, puts it on Instagram with his own thoughts about it, in which he called them hateful.
Right.
Come on, that's private business, and if you're not willing to, just keep it that way, then you're exposing team issues, and I think that's never good.
I actually saw that first on your Twitter feed, and that is at KD Pomp. Is that correct?
That's correct. Thank you.
No, absolutely. Yeah, that's where I saw that yesterday, and first, and it's just such an enigma. What's happened with Antonio Brown? I mean, who knows? You're right. I think at some point he just decided he wasn't getting what was his, and so he decided he was going to make a lot of noise and do it. But now the stuff over the shoes and the the frostbitten feet, that's the kind of weird behavior that you start seeing. I feel like right before a guy sort of washes out of the league, or you see a real decline in his performance because everything else is taken over. And that's all these guys who left these receivers who left the Steelers. I mean, Plaxico Burress obviously won a Super Bowl, but a lot of these receivers, Mike Wallace, et cetera, their career, their production really took a downshift after they left the team. And do you expect that from Antonio? What kind of season do you think he'll have?
Expect it to be a turbulent season, but I still think his talent is there, and it'll go smoothly only if he gets the ball a lot, only if they do well. And I mean, they Carr to Brown. I don't think he really cares about the outcome of games.
Yeah.
And early in his career, I thought that I would never say that about him, but I think it's all about his own personal stats. What he's going to find out when his career is over, though, is that the legacy will matter. And when people say you've never won a championship and you were an egomaniacal kind of guy, a narcissist, it may all, at one point set in, and he's going to realize that he made bad choices.
Yeah.
So, but I do think he'll have a good year as long as he keeps getting the ball and as long as the numbers are there.
Right.
I've seen him be happy when they lose, and yet he has 10 catches for 155 yards and 2 touchdowns. I've seen him not want to talk when they win a game, and he's not a big reason why.
Right. One more. Let's quickly go to one more former Steeler, just because I think someone a lot of people have an interest in, or lack of interest in. I was at a Kohl's recently, and I saw Le'Veon Bell's jersey for $4.99, and there was a large stack of them. What do you make of him so far, and that decision to hold out and then take less money to go to a pretty crappy team?
I don't like in his situation Antonio in any way. I think he was strictly making what he thought was a good business move. It turned out to backfire.
Yeah.
He's not only better off financially here, he's better off trying to win here.
Yeah.
He goes to a place where he's going to be under a lot of scrutiny if things don't go well. And I think he miscalculated everything. He wanted to be the guy who's going to set the bar for all the rest of the running backs. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I don't know. But to me, he should just be worried about being happy, content, and there's no way the Steelers were not going to guarantee every bit of his contract. When I say guarantee, not literally, but they were never going to cut him.
Right.
So he was worried about all his upfront money. It didn't matter. He was going to get it. I've never seen the Steelers cut people after they sign a long contract,
right,
especially a marquee name.
Yeah, and so what we saw out of that, of course, was the James Conner come on strong. How do you like, and you've watched James play for a long time now, I would think. How do you like in James to Le'Veon? These are different kinds of runners, but
different. Yeah, totally different. I don't know that you could make comparisons. I just think I look at the numbers at the end. If he gives them what they need in terms of first and second down to set up third and short, or keep moving and change, but I think he can do that. I think, his big thing is just making sure he's healthy, which I never knock guys for. A lot of people around media will knock guys and call them soft, but some of these injuries people get, you can't control.
Right.
Marquise Pouncey's had knee injuries.
Right.
He's not soft. He got hit from behind in a preseason game against Green Bay. It rolled up. I as soon as I saw it, I knew it was serious. So that doesn't make him soft. Sometimes you're just a bad luck victim, when it comes to injury. So I think if he's healthy, he could be exactly what they need. And I think Jalen Samuels, if there's one guy I'm going to pick for you, Charlie, who will have a year that I think people will look back on and say, wow, it'll be Jalen Samuels.
What do you like about him, Bob?
everything. I like the shiftiness. I like how he blitz pickups. I like how he runs patterns. I like how he runs the ball. I think for a 5th-round pick, they got a steal in him.
Yeah, and of course, there wouldn't be a running game without the offensive line. And as I was writing our Steelers preview, I was looking at numbers of our offensive line, of the Steelers' offensive line, and at one time when you look at how often Ben Roethlisberger has been on his back in his career, but then you look at the last 3 seasons. Do you think that they're the best offensive line in football, or certainly in the conversation?
Yes, one of them, and it's because of continuity. One of the reasons why I think the Steelers are going to win on Sunday, and I'll be, it's funny when you make that prediction, you're going a homer. I look at it beyond that. I'm looking at it statistically. When I look at let's talk about offensive line.
Yeah.
The Steelers have been together for a long time. They invested a lot of money. Their goal was to keep Ben upright. Their goal was to keep this thing moving as long as they can and keep the window open. I think they've succeeded in doing that, even though he remains the number 1 sack quarterback in the NFL during his career.
Right.
But New England, on the other hand, which always, I give them a lot of credit. Their offensive line coach is really good, and Belichick relies on him. But they lost their starting center, Larry Marquise Pouncey, all season long to an injury. They had to go out and make changes, and they eventually changed 3 positions to adequately because they had to move a guard to center, and then they brought in a couple of other people from other teams. They haven't been together for more than a week and a half, and I'm just curious if the Steelers will be able to take advantage of that. Cam Hayward, along with Hargrave and Tuitt. I do think, and Watt coming off the edge, I'm bullish on Dupree. I think they have a lot of good weapons on defense, and I think it'll be a much better defensive team.
Yeah, I like what I've seen out of Bud so far, and I think that he's finally going to probably play up to the potential that they thought he was going to have. He's looked good, and then Devin Bush, the sky's the limit on that guy. Would you agree? I mean, who knows what he's going to end up doing by the end of his career?
Yeah, pretty special play, and I'm glad they got him. Although, kid in New England, Chase Winovich, a lot of people around here wanted the Steelers to take him. He's a very good player, too. He played with Bush at Michigan, so they're going to go opposite one. Not literally, but, they're going to be on the field in the opening night. And it's always good to see local guys do well, and he's one of them.
Before we start talking about the NFL at large, let's kind of wrap up with the Steelers. Let's talk a little bit about Ben Roethlisberger. I mean, this is someone whose career I know that you have followed closely. When he's had his issues and problems in the past, you did sit down interviews with him. So I want to talk about Ben the player, but also, and this is something I think that my audience would want me to ask about. And you've seen Ben, like I said, throughout his pro career. Ben Roethlisberger. Do you believe that Ben Roethlisberger is a different person than the kid who first came in the league and got involved in motorcycle accidents and some of those other allegations? How have you seen him grown? Do you think he's a different person than he was when he entered the league?
I do. I think a lot has happened with him. I think he's a very mature guy. I think he's gone through enough to realize that he made bad choices. And sometimes, before you can solve anything in your life, you have to realize and admit that you have problems. Right. A lot of people are unwilling to admit it. Once you admit it, then you realize I better start doing this, 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 and this. And I think he's checkmarked all those things. It starts with his family life, which has given him a different perspective, and I think a more mature perspective. And I think that's been the big difference with him. He's also now to the point, and I know him pretty well, so I think I can say this, he is appreciating football and life so much more. He knows he only has so many years, even though he still plans to play out this 3 years and go into his 40s.
Yeah.
And he may be longer. I'm never going to rule that out with him. But I think he realizes he's on house money right now. He's going to enjoy the ride, enjoy the experience, and try to win.
So, and that's kind of leading into what I was going to ask you. What kind of time does Roethlisberger have, and at what point? I mean, maybe I don't know that I think that Mason Rudolph is the guy to succeed Ben Roethlisberger. Maybe you have a different opinion on that. But at what point do the Steelers look for their Aaron Rodgers to take over when Brett Favre retires? And I mean, do you think Rudolph is that guy? I mean, he looked great in the preseason, but
well, I mean, that's the question. If everything goes as planned, Rudolph will probably never play here and be with another team, not unlike Garoppolo
right.
with to San Francisco. Just because the contract will have played out, they can't afford it unless Ben, if he's going to retire after 3 years, then that corresponds with Mason almost identically, off by 1 year. But they could do a deal with Mason if they see enough of him. And I don't think he's incapable of doing it. we haven't seen it on a regular game
Right.
basis. But yeah, I think he is. But they're going to have to make that choice as time comes. It's good to have insulation. You never know when an injury will occur. And in Roethlisberger's case, if it does, I think they're pretty well suited at backup.
And do you think it may be a thing that when Roethlisberger sort of when his time comes that do you think that they'll have the future quarterback when Ben goes, or do you think that's something they'll worry about at the time? Maybe a veteran,
You know what, Charlie?
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to have to make that. But at this point, they have guys who are capable, and I think their job is to insulate them from injury, and that's what they got to do. And I think they've done a good job there, even though some people think taking Dobbs in the 4th round was a stretch because they knew he'd never play. And even with Mace Rudolph in the 3rd round, some people at the end of it say, well, you wasted the pick. Well, again, their job is to insulate quarterback. If he never plays, that doesn't mean it was a bad pick. That means he just never played. So that's life in the NFL.
Yeah, Dobbs is a hell of a nice guy. That was
He's
a cut that I understand, but I hated to see just because through interviewing him and some stuff he's done with us. Josh Dobbs is just he's a heck of a nice guy. So with a tough loss, I think from that perspective, but it's all about football, I guess, at the end of the day.
Totally is.
So let's talk about the impending NFL season. Let's talk first about one of the things that I actually wanted to talk to someone like you about was, what do you make now that you've seen preseason? You've seen the 4 preseason games. You've probably watched a lot more than that. What do you make of the new? What do you make of the new challenge to pass interference? What have you seen of that? How it's played out, and what do you just generally think of it?
Well, I'm surprised it came to a rule change based on one play that was screwed up, and it was a bad call.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm surprised they went to that length. I think Sean Payton, really complained enough for the league, said, well, we can't have these moments. What do we do now? If they respond every way like that, they're going to be in trouble because holding calls will be the next. If there's a significant holding call, either missed or called in a significant game that has the same kind of effect, they may be forced to do it again, and that's too much. What I've seen is inconsistency.
Yeah.
The whole term that they use is clear and obvious. Nothing I saw in the preseason was clear and obvious, and yet they didn't change calls or either way. And I think that was their challenge.
Yeah. And so going into the season, what are some of the storylines you're looking at as you go into the NFL season across the league?
Hang on one second. I get my dog.
We are talking to Bob Pompeani here on the Pittsburgh Current podcast. We're talking Steelers football. Bears, Packers kick off tonight to start the season. But yeah, we're talking to Bob. Bob, what are the storylines that you see that are going to make this season interesting?
Well, there are a lot of them. I really think the NFC is loaded with talent, and I got to figure that the NFC is going to have a hard time trying to get playoff teams, and they're going to leave some good ones out. The AFC, on the other hand, not so much. I think the AFC, I go into this thinking New England, Pittsburgh, Kansas City.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people are bullish on Cleveland. I'm not necessarily yet, anyway. That's how I like to phrase that. I think in time, but not now.
Yeah.
And as far as the thing I always love about the NFL, and one of the reasons why I moan and groan about baseball not having a salary cap, is because every year in the NFL, because things are spread equally, revenue, you have a cap, you have a floor, you have everything the same, is that you have stories that go from worst to first every single year. 15 of the last 16 NFL seasons have produced a team that was in last place the year before and ended up in first place the next year. And 3 of those teams went from worst in their division to winning a Super Bowl.
Wow.
So that's what makes it compelling to me. And there are only 16 games. They all take on monumental importance, I think, and that includes this week. Playoff implications, you can say it's week 1. How can you say that? Well, at the end of the day, if the New England Patriots win the tiebreaker because they beat the Steelers head-to-head, they get home field in the playoffs. That's huge. That's how they win. So you try to deny that when you can. I just love the NFL and how they have it set up. It's the most perfect league when it comes to equality in terms of money, allocation, revenue sharing, and talent distribution. That's what you want as an ownership.
Yeah, and I think again I agree with you. That's and maybe we'll get into that in a couple of minutes if we have time. But that's one of the issues with baseball.
I beg to ask you this, Charlie, because I have to take a call here. This guy's been trying to call me. We had a conference call set up at 11, so I don't mean to cut it short, but I have to get to that eventually.
Well, yeah, you know what? Let's wrap up then with a couple of final questions with Bob Pompeani. How do you see? What kind of season do you see for the Steelers, Bob?
Well, I went on and I made those predictions. I think they're kind of useless mostly because we never know. Injuries dictate everything, sure. Charlie. It could change in a heartbeat. 11-5 is what I see. Cleveland battling them for second. Cleveland gets to a wild card. I like New England to win that division because there's really no challengers to it.
Yeah.
I still think Kansas City's a really good team. And out west, the Chargers have to be favored. Although I'm not going to be disappointed if I see Denver because I've been kind of bullish on Joe Flacco. I think Joe Flacco will have a nice bounce-back season with that team. So I think they're going to be somewhat of a problem. From the NFC, I think, like I say, it's wide open. Just to cut short, because I can go on and on about this, but I like Seattle a lot. I think they made some really good deals, including the one for Clowney, to put pressure on quarterbacks. Their defense, they needed a little shot in the arm. They got Ziggy Ansah and they got Clowney, and those are two very good, high-productive pass rushers. So I look for Seattle, and that's that opener here in 2 weeks. It's going to be a tough one for the Steelers.
Right.
But I think Seattle, it could be Seattle getting to the but I'm hoping a Pittsburgh-Philadelphia Super Bowl. I've been waiting for an all-state Super Bowl.
That's what
hasn't happened. Maybe this year will be the year.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you is your Super Bowl prediction. Yeah, that would be that. Yeah, I think that would be a great interstate Super Bowl. Bob, I've taken up way too much of your time, and I really appreciate you.
No, I wish I had more. I just got this thing I got to get to, and I wasn't sure when it was going to happen. But
yeah, we'd love to. Yeah, well, no, yeah, that's great, and we'd love to have you back later in the season.
Anytime, you name it, and it doesn't matter the sport, Charlie.
All right.
I love talking about
Perfect. Thank you very much. Bob Pompeani live here on the Pittsburgh Current podcast. Yeah, football's one of those strange times of year when the fan in me has a head-on collision with the social justice Charlie and me, and so it's definitely one of those odd times of years. That's for sure. One thing I did want to get to with Bob, and one thing that I'll just I don't know what kind of opinion how much heft my opinion has on something like Colin Kaepernick, but that's a situation that a lot of people will say well, he's just not good enough. But when you look at some of the backup quarterbacks in the league, to think that a guy like Colin Kaepernick doesn't have a job, and to say that that's not because of his political views or because of his stance when he took a knee at the anthem, it's ridiculous. It's one of the most blatant cases of racism costing someone a job, not just in sports, but in any business, really. It's so obvious sometimes that it's just almost ridiculous that it's still going on. So my big prediction for this football season, and I did draft Colin Kaepernick with the last pick in my fantasy football draft. I've done that every year, and I'll continue to do that. So that's a guy that deserves a shot and deserves a job. And hopefully we can pretend that this is not the 1964 NFL season. We can step up and realize what time it is and get a guy like Kaepernick a job. But this has been, speaking of jobs, I have to go do one, and that's running the Pittsburgh Current Fall Guide, September 17th. Look for that. And again, if you have anything, if you're an organization or you have events coming up, Charlie at pittsburghcurrent.com, and we'll get that in the guide for you. If you'd like to advertise in that guide, please hit up Andrea at pittsburghcurrent.com or Paul at pittsburghcurrent.com. This has been the Pittsburgh Current podcast. Have a great week. A better alternative, giving Pittsburgh a better alternative, giving Pittsburgh a better alternative.
A better alternative.